Yeah. Maybe one more objection we'll explore, Josh, before we wrap
Sure.
up is this idea of like, well, maybe just like explanation ends at necessary things.
Hmm.
So I know people like Oppie have talked a lot about this. Like when we get to like something that's necessary, well, there just is no further explanation. So maybe there is like an arbitrary limit. Maybe it's just like 7 particles or a nice like
Yes.
donut sized like multiverse or something like that. And that's just the
Yeah.
way it is. And it's
Yeah.
necessary. So we don't need a further explanation. So I'm curious what you think here.
Yeah. It could be a donut or it could be a turtle. I mean, really, that multiverse could
That'd be
look
pretty
just like a
cool.
turtle. That'd be awesome. Well, it's interesting. I actually first encountered this question, this objection from Michael Tooley when I was in graduate school, and I was sharing with him some ideas that I was having on this argument. And he brought this up. He said, well, it looks to me, Josh, that numbers as abstract entities would have limits. I think he used the number 8. He said it's divisible by 2 like 3 times over. And that divisible by 2 by 3 times over, that's a limit. That's a quantitative property. And so by your argument, it should have some sort of cause. But if the numbers are abstract and necessarily existing entities, they have no cause. And so therefore that would be an exception to my principle. And as I've thought about this, there's a few things that I could say. The modest thing that I want to say is that even if it doesn't have a cause, it's still, I think, going to have a further explanation in terms of more basic principles. I mean, even in mathematics, I think that it's not just sort of arbitrary why the numbers are what they are. I think the numbers are what they are in virtue of more basic principles of numbers. And
Mhm.
then those more basic principles of numbers are themselves grounded, I think, in terms of the foundational reality. The foundational reality is going to ground all the basic principles. Like the reason that there are principles is in terms of a foundational reality. Or if the basic principles are themselves foundational and ungrounded, okay, well, as long as their attributes meet the 4 criteria, they're qualitative and not quantitative, not arbitrarily limited, et cetera, then maybe the total of the necessary realm, which includes the total of the abstract principles and the total of the causal powers and all of it in total is supreme. So you could
Mhm.
think of the supreme nature as coloring in the totality of whatever is fundamental, and that will kind of leave open in a way whether it's part of the fundamental reality that there are mathematical principles. But I don't think that quantities are going to be fundamental for the reasons I've given. Quantities are going to depend on prior states and prior conditions. Um,
Mhm.
so that's what I would say now. Now, I didn't get back to Tooley. I mean, that was back in graduate school, and I've been thinking about it since. So I don't know kind of what he would say about that. But I have had conversations with others about this, and it seems like this does help. It does push forward the conversation because it shows how even if there is a kind of necessary layer to reality, still that doesn't thereby show that there can be no further explanation. And
Mhm.
if we want to sort of trace explanations as far as we can, then we can, I think, explain necessary numbers and necessary principles in terms of more basic axioms and more basic structures. I mean, because otherwise, it is kind of mysterious. I mean, something I've been thinking a lot about is like, why does fundamental reality have the attributes that it has? If it has some positive attributes of the power to produce things, the power to know things, if it has some of these attributes, why does it have those positive attributes? And if we say, well, it's absolutely perfect, that would kind of explain why all of its identifiable attributes are positive. If it's absolutely
Mhm.
perfect, that predicts that all of its attributes would be positive. Um, it'd be sort of weird if like there was the number 1, the number 2, the number 4, but the number 3 was like missing. That would be sort of weird, right? It's like, well, why would that be weird? Well, it'd be weird because it seems like it wouldn't help if you said, oh, well, it's just necessarily missing. That doesn't explain. Like, I hope this is getting clear. It's like merely saying it's necessary doesn't give you that deeper explanation. If you say, well, number 3 is just necessarily missing, there's a hole in the number line and it's just necessary. It's like putting aside the fact that um, you might think it's not necessary that it's missing, just put that aside for the moment. It seems like all independent of that, there's just something arbitrary about there being a hole in the number line. It would be
Mhm.
simpler and it would be a deeper explanation if instead all the numbers have a further explanation instead of
Yeah.
saying that, well, some of them do, some of them don't, or even that None of them do. Well, if none of them do, then we're back to filling out the foundation in terms of all of the necessary things together. That adds up to a supreme nature. So that's a lot. I said probably more than what you're asking for, but it's because I've been thinking a lot about that. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
different things that you can say about that.